Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Auto Hawker podcast or series, whatever you want to call it. Tonight, we're interviewing a very special guest and one that is becoming rather, I would say, famous very quickly. We have Yancey. Yancey, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Yancey. I'm not becoming famous that quickly. I just had a decent article thanks to the OGC. I ran an article on this musician because I'm a musician, and I kind of want to prioritize like music in this sphere, or at least from our perspective, our certain political persuasion. Anyway, it was an article sort of detailing this artist named Early James, who's from the same state that I am, and how he co-opted the song "The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down" by the band, which is, for those of you who don't know, is pretty reverential um, about the state of the Southern people in the wake of the loss that they suffered at the hands of the Union and in the Civil War. So it's kind of it was an exploration of the human aspect of it. It's not even really that political of a song. It's just an exploration of that loss that they suffered. And this guy saw fit to in the year 2020 rewrite the lyrics to be sort of uh, just tastelessly taking pleasure in the downfall of the Southern people in the Civil War. And it struck me just because it was, it really didn't have anything to do with politics for me, just so much as it was this guy's looking for political clout in this kind of tumultuous year, and he's gonna, basically put his bloodline up for ransom, for in exchange for some small credibility, some pats on the head, as I put in the article. So I probably could have summed that up a lot better, but it's just it's as simple as that, and how disgusting it is. And it's a little bit more of an irreverent article. It does not compare to all the great content that's over there on the OGC Substack. But I do think it was, maybe people saw it as a little bit refreshing because it was irreverent, and it was just kind of, it was pretty casual, not very, not big on the formalist language, and it was just a little, it was pointed, and it was emotional. So yeah, that kind of sums up that article and why you're having me on here, I guess.
Well, I think you summed up your article very well, but I mean, I guess that makes sense for somebody that writes their own article. You're probably able
Right.
to sum it up well. Um, I I think the article was great because it highlights our state, me and you, from the same state and relatively same area.
Hmm.
And a lot of people, in the sphere, don't exactly get that. I guess get that to an extent, and by get that, I mean have the privilege to do that. But we see, in the South, and I can think of since the early 2000s with the music industry, a lot of these, quote unquote, what we thought were conservative, normal American artist people are actually liberal. And that term eventually ended up being developed hick lib. I don't know who coined the term, but it's very accurate for, do you know like Chris Stapleton?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, like he's a big one, or Steve Earle.
Or Jason Isbell.
Yes, I was thinking of Jason Isbell, and I couldn't remember his name because
Hmm.
I'd never heard of the guy.
Yeah.
And I think it was last summer, or maybe it was 2 summers ago, but it was sometime in the summer, and he was either doing a concert or he had came out and said something, and people were basically finding out for the first time that, oh, this guy is liberal. But it's funny because a lot of people, I don't know if you're, comfortable with me sharing, the the state that we live in. I mean, I've been pretty open about it on here, but
Yeah, I say I'm from Alabama in the article, so I mean it's all good. I'm not that
okay.
paranoid. I mean, unless you're wanting to share my address where I
Oh,
live and
oh
how
no,
many family members I have that go to the same church.
oh no, you're good.
That would be an issue. But I mean, I try to. I mean, I know we've got guys that have had their run-ins with various types of people with doxing, but I really don't. I mean, I with my interests and my sort of what I engage with, I it's pretty clean for the most part. If it even though it is dissident, so just for future reference, like I'm fine with you saying where we're from and sort of drawing from that in our
Okay.
conversation.
Well, that's all good and dandy then. And it really what I really like about this article is that it's finally people from Alabama actually stepping up and doing something. And I think I've said this before on here that I might have been on the when I went on Burden's podcast. I said that Alabama's really only ever known for like the civil rights. It's not even known for really the Civil War. You don't think of
Right.
there's nobody really famous from Alabama that led in the Civil War. It committed most of its fighting age men of the war, but nobody really of any particular rank or of note came from here. You could maybe argue that Joseph Wheeler did, but I mean most people that don't even know who he is. It's not like saying like Nathan Bedford Forrest or Robert E. Lee.
Hmm.
So it was kind of our state is really I would say in a lot of ways it's kind of like a new state. It only really rose to prominence after the war, and it's only really it's only really gaining national, international, and national interest because of the MLK, the Montgomery bus boycott, things of that nature. I'm not here to
Hmm.
talk about that all day. Obviously,
Hmm.
you know where I kind of stand in regards to some of that stuff. I'm
Yeah.
kind of skeptical of it. Is the
Hmm.
best way to put it lightly. Um, but what do you think this whole hick lib phenomenon comes from? Because in the song, we see that was Virgil Caine. He's very clear about family, his friends taking a stand, and it seems like throughout most of our history, people in the South have been up into a very recent history. Most people were very unapologetic about anything concerning Southern history. A
Hmm.
rebel flag did not bother them,
Hmm.
and
Well, you
now
think, yeah, I mean, like the rebel flag is the best example. Like, I mean, freaking Tom Petty in the late '70s and '80s was like throwing around a rebel flag, because it was synonymous with rebellion and rock and roll. I mean that's like it's up there with the swastika as like a sort of an irreverent and like exciting symbol that sort of has a magic to it. I mean, I don't want to associate you know your channel with the swastika for YouTube purposes, but you understand what I'm saying.
oh no, I mean
It's a
everybody of all political spectrums gets that.
and
I know what
well,
you're
you had
saying.
Sid Vicious in the '70s wearing a swastika. I mean, these guys were like the most degenerate. Would probably be shit libs today, except for Johnny Rotten, who is actually like a Trump guy and Brexit guy. Funny enough, but yeah, but I mean, still, it's the yeah, that iconography was adopted by most mainstream artists or high profile people just because it signified something um you know um it signified like individuality basically, but but you can't have any individuality now, and that's sort of what I kind of denote in the article is like everything has to be conformed to the modern morality. A lot of people can term it whatever they want, the cathedral, the consensus, whatever, but it's a unique like social technology that has been implemented over the past like 15 to 20 years, and I'm not smart enough to get to the bottom of like where it's at, but I do know it has a lot to do with just the culmination of these false narratives about America. Um, Specifically, like the whole idea that the Confederacy is somehow morally repugnant, or that people who oppose the civil rights movement were morally repugnant. That you know that's just not true, and these narratives that hold up that worldview, that point of view, um, they they were not opposed because most people did buy into the basic framework, even though they didn't really agree with where they, the end result of these things. Like the civil rights movement is the whole thing is based on the you know, revoking freedom of association, and the whole cause of the Civil War was the idea that states should be able to determine what happens to their people and their own economies. There's something that's people are being assimilated into, and it's like early progressivism of Lincoln and the progressivism of the 60s. Like it's the sort almost like a primordial force to me. And you're not going to get me really like detailing like the history of the Confederacy or anything like that in my article, because I'm like, not to sound pretentious, but like I have an artistic predisposition, so like I'm mostly governed by like emotion and sentimentality. And not that I don't understand the facts of the Civil War. Like I'm very familiar with it, but even if I wasn't, I would still have this perspective, an emotional one, because I'm from the state, and my family, I have family that fought in the Civil War and died at the hands of the northern aggressors. It's that I have a sentimental emotional attachment to this event that I cannot decouple myself from, um, even though there is some political currency for people to do that. And that's exactly what this guy in the article I wrote. And for those of who are wondering what the article is, I wrote the article on the OGC Substack, and it's called "Unlike My Father Before Me." It's a play on the lyrics that early James rewrote, um, for his cover of "The Night They Dribbled Dixie Down." So, um, anything you want to delve into more on that, or we can jump in kind of the article proper and kind of what
I was kind of
drove
wanting
it.
to, I was kind of wanting to ask you, and I think you already sort of answered it before we go into the article proper. But you said I was going to ask you about what do you think causes hic libs? Do you think it's a this is kind of this is exactly meant to be a highbrow thought provoking question, but it's do you think that these people are more or less created by the fact that the people that they're around they just don't get along with, and it kind of pushes them outside their own culture? Or do you think these are people that are exposed to an outside culture first, and they come back to their own culture and think that they're uncivilized? Do you get what I'm asking? Kind of.
Hey, kind of broke up there.
Oh, okay. I'll just re-ask the question again.
Yeah,
So,
sure. Sorry about that.
do you think? No, that's fine. Do you think the Hicklib phenomenon? Do you think it is caused by these people more or less being in our culture, what we think of as the South, and they're sort of more or less booted out of the culture for not being able to hold up to the ideals that we aspire as as men and as women, and and they basically go out and they find the what I'm going to call like the mainstream culture in the West, and they latch onto that and have to basically show it to everybody? Or do you think it is a more like they're exposed to this outside culture, this mainstream culture, and then when they kind of start coming into you know like when they start coming into Southern culture, they start saying, "Whoa, like this is not how the rest of the country behaves. Like you need to behave yourselves like them." Like,
Yeah,
I guess like what I'm trying to say is like number one is, we all know those kids at school that were bullied. They were whatever. They just didn't basically fit in with the rest of the people, and so they end up kind of finding an outside culture, and it usually always makes them like a crap lib. Versus, on the other end, we have people that, and I see this more with like women, that they're just
Yeah.
exposed like constantly to basically greater narratives and wider. They're the women are not aspiring to be like the Southern Belle. They're aspiring to be like a New York model. And when they're up in New York all the time, they're seeing the way the rest of the country works. And when they come back to some place like Birmingham, they say, "Oh no, this is all wrong. This is like uncivilized. This is behind the times, and these people need to basically get with the program." Which one do you think it is, or do you think that well, I just kind of answered it, and that we have those two things happening, really?
Yeah, no, 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 you really kind of hit on it that these people are like losers in their communities, where they come from. I mean, not, and I don't say that to be like, oh, you're losers, you should go kill yourself. But like, yeah, you're like you don't fit in. You're the outcast, and that's fine. Like every society, every clique or every pod of people, is going to have its outcasts, and usually those are the ones that can be a vanguard. These are people that can see outside of the group, but they're a part of it. They sort of catch on to things early. I kind of think that that's what I was, because if anybody knows me, I'm not like I didn't have a lifted truck or anything, or like, I'm like, I went hunting and stuff, but like, I don't like fishing. Like, I'd rather stay inside, at least when I was a teenager, and like play music, listen to music, or, play video games or something like that, or so, some other creative hobby. And, and of course, and I've had friends, but I think we all, if you've lived down here, you understand like what the normie basically is down here. It's guys who, love football.
Love beer.
They're yeah, and beer, but they're politically incorrect. They actually really do clash in a major way with the mainstream, and what's expected of men, in pop culture. They really do, and they've been clashing with that for like years. I mean, probably like 30 years. These guys are not necessarily like highly intelligent, but they're in touch with sort of their basic human instincts, so they understand certain fundamentals about reality that they can't be socialized out of not understanding. If that makes any, it's the midwit meme. I mean, it's like these guys are literally on the bottom end of the bell curve, and that's what actually keeps them sane. They can't, they're not smart enough to realize like, oh, I got to get with the program and change who I am, and I'll get goodies and rewards. They can't even understand that, and that's actually they are sort of a bulwark against that, at least in the rural areas like where I lived. But I relate to the guy that I wrote the article about, early James, because he was sort of, he said in the Rolling Stone article that where they interviewed him after he performed this version of the song where he changed the lyrics to be politically correct and basically take pleasure in the destruction of the Southern people. Sick stuff. But the Rolling Stone article, they asked him about what his upbringing was like and stuff like that, and he has an anecdote that I actually really relate to. He's like, people blare, "Sweet Home Alabama" in their trucks, I would always cringe. And it's kind of like, I sort of felt that way, not necessarily because I didn't have pride in being a Southerner. I just thought it was corny. I thought it was like on the nose. Like, you think about my idea of like, a person taking pride in being a Southerner would look something like how Seamus Haney takes pride in being an Irishman. It's subtle, and it's beautiful, and it's deep, and it's not really like, you know the song "Sweet Home Alabama" is basically just, it's equivalent to like wearing a football jersey. Basically, it's just it's like branding almost, is what it feels like. So in that way, I do kind of relate to him. But the thing I can't relate to is that wanting, um, you know, um, to be accepted by people outside of my own community, basically the mainstream. Because I think I had this experience after high school where I got out of the small town and played in bands and in Birmingham and stuff like that, and I was around transvestites and like libtarded people, like progressives, and I did not. The last thing I wanted was to actually be accepted by these people, because they're sad and they're sick and they're twisted. And
And I'm oh, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
no,
You were
yeah, just if you were there with me, Otto, you would know exactly what I'm talking about, because I think a lot of conservatives had this idea that leftists are like, at least younger leftists are like, well, they're kind of cool and they have status, and it's like, well, they have status, but it's sort of in an abstract sense, like in a, like on social media they can get updates or on Reddit or something like that, but in real life a lot of these people don't really get the benefits that you would think you would get by being aligned with like the left wing coalition. They just don't like trickle down to that level. Anyways, but I think I've been tempted with what Mr. Early has been tempted with, which is just people think you're great and you're cool because you're not a total freak, but you're open enough that you defy sort of their expectations. And I don't see anything worthwhile in being accepted by those types of people, like at all. I'd rather stick with these people that, while I cringed when they blared Sweet Home Alabama, and some of them have kids out of wedlock, I actually care about these people because I grew up around them and I have an experience with them that I can't tear myself from them. Like we have, in a lot of ways we share the same blood too. If most of these people that I'm talking about were ruralites that their whole families had been in these towns, in the town that I grew up in for years. So I mean, it's just, you can trade in, you know um, trade in the uncomfortable feeling of trying to, conform, either like conform, not necessarily conform yourself, but find your place where you're from. And that doesn't necessarily mean staying in the small town forever, but it just means finding your place in their ecosystem, and not hating them. That's really uncomfortable. That requires a lot of self-reflection, and it's so much easier to join the cavalcade of freaks who will give you validation immediately because you're slightly better looking than they are, and you have like a token aspect to your personality. He's the token Southern guy who's not, who doesn't take pride in his heritage, that kind of thing. Anyway.
no, that's very fair. And for a time when I was in college, I kind of more or less by accident kind of fell into a lot with some of these people my first 2 years. Fortunately, none of them were, far gone, but a lot of them were. I mean, let's just say one of the guys that I was associated with was very much in that like I hate the redneck country people of Alabama because I live in a country redneck area and I want
Mm-hmm.
to get away from them and I'm smarter than them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically everything about him was like trying to somehow bring up and separate himself from the people he was from in his town, whether it was that he had ancestors that fought for the North in the war, or that he had ancestors that were from the South that fought for the North.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like everything he did was like some kind of sort of like virtue signal of that I'm not like these bumbling redneck hicks. Well, at the same time though, this guy was like a huge porn addict. So it's like why it's like
Mm-hmm.
how can you sit there and like lecture me and other people I know about our opinions when you're like living this completely amoral lifestyle that is taking advantage of the dehumanization of
Mm-hmm. Right.
people.
I mean, these people, you'll find that, well, I mean, to maybe put a cap on the Hicklib thing, because there's really not a lot to these people. They are just insecure. They don't fit in. They're really not like, and who can blame them? Like the Hicklib usually is like a few points of IQ above, the people they go to school with or the people in their county. if they're um, if they're particularly poor county. But even just in general, I think hick libs are slightly more intelligent than the people they try to distance themselves from. I mean that feels natural. That's more of a teenage inclination. As an adult, you have to realize that uh, the people you grow up around and the people that you sort of spend most of your life around and have either family ties to or like some other history with those people. You can't really tear yourself away from them. That's not saying people can't move somewhere else and try to live a good life or something like that. That not everybody has to live in the same town they grew up in, for the rest of their life, or that their parents, lived in. But it just means that you can't turn your back on these people and think yourself better than them. Uh, because it'll just make you a like a sick individual who's always got something to prove. And I mean, it's not something that'll ever be resolved with these people because it's a deep insecurity they have with themselves first. It has very little to do with the people around them. But I think if you want to talk like anthropologically, it's it's that they are smart enough to realize that yes, there's minimal status, but in being like valedictorian in a town of like 3,000 or something like that, or I don't know, or just like becoming somebody of note in their high school, or in the local business or some sense like that. But like there's infinitely more sort of status that comes with being slightly higher than where they are right now on their rung, and all they have to do is cash out and turn their back on their people by going to a big city and doing that. But eventually, I mean that credibility can't last forever. I mean you can only get by with
And
that for a while.
I've noticed it seems like it's on a softer scale, more prominent in women than it is men. And what I mean by softer scale, I mean like soft hick lib. I mean I'll give you an example when the great martyr of 2020 happened, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody had to give their opinion on it. I noticed that a lot of women and females, girls, were posting the black square
Mm-hmm.
in solidarity,
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't see a lot of men do it. Now, with men, I noticed that after that happened, some of those people I was running around with in early college, that's when they basically sold their souls to the left, was after that event. For some reason, I really don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I guess they were on the fence and they saw it as, oh, I can come out and basically parrot what the news was saying, because the news was all pro George, really,
Mm-hmm.
when it happened. And I
Well,
guess this
aren't we all pro George really?
it just depends on which George you're talking about, I guess. And and I think a lot of those people saw it as, well, if all the news media is basically saying this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, and I start saying this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, then I'm not going to get made fun of, because people are going to sit there and say, oh, well, everybody's saying it's bad. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people only get made fun of when they dissent. When they go against the grain.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, that whole year was just really a change, and I think it had something to do with people didn't know what was going on. At least where I live, nobody knew what was happening. Uh, we closed down for like 2 weeks, and everything opened back up. But it was people thought like the Black Death was coming,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people, when people started dying, people weren't looking and saying, oh, you know, this person lived a very unhealthy life and they got the disease and died. It was oh my gosh, they died. I need to get the vaccine and like show solidarity with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a mad rush to basically like even now, like a lot of like country redneck dudes I talk to, like they're not as hardcore as me. They're not as
Mm-hmm.
politically incorrect as me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just quite shocking. Um, and it seems like that one event or I say those two events in 2022 just really rocked people, and when they got under pressure, they crumbled.
Mhm.
And it's just amazing to see that, now people like us are against the grain. When we finally, kind of wake up and catch our senses,
Mhm.
it's kind of sad that we're the ones back on the back foot again in
Mhm.
our areas.
Mhm. Well, you know, the thing with women though, I really don't contribute that to a Hicklip thing because that's actually pretty natural. Because I mean, not to get all what's the rational male guy, Rollo Tomasi? Yeah, not to
I
get all
guess.
rational male on you, but like that makes more sense that women would pursue something that they think would increase their status. Maybe that's not technically right, but like maybe not status, but just not necessarily to increase their own status, but just the weight or the implications of the mainstream beliefs not being followed. The implication is that you are like not agreeable, and you're basically the worst quality that in a woman is being disagreeable. So they all sort of conform to whatever narrative. Even in rural states and in urban areas, women overall are more susceptible to that stuff because they just want to agree, like they just want to be safe, like they don't want to be called out for anything, and that's actually perfectly natural. And I would warn guys to, if you find a woman who is like based in red pilled and disagreeable with like the mainstream, unless it's literally her father's politics, stay away, because you can deal with a woman who is like, yeah, I support abortion, never had an abortion, but I support abortion. Yeah, I support Black Lives Matter. Don't really have any black friends, but that's a woman you can actually salvage because they're just being agreeable. They're just being nice. Which is the qualities that you want in a woman, and she'll eventually come around to you. Once you make it clear that you're kind of the only thing that should matter in her life. But because I see a lot of people get turned off, young men especially just get like so disillusioned, like all the women are libtarded, and it's like, yeah, well, back in the 50s, women were more religious than men. Like, why was that? Like, women go with the consensus. They don't come to any. I don't know if this is too spicy for your YouTube channel, but like they really do not come to any conclusion independently. It's all filtered through institutions or people or relationships. So that's a tangent. I'm sorry that we got on, but I
Oh,
think
you're
that's an
good.
I think that's just the hick lib with men specifically. It's what you want to watch out for, because these are the types of guys who are sick and will stab you in the back because they're doing it to be perceived as smarter by people who they have no relation to. It's totally performative on their end. It's actually not like a deeply held belief that they have. I don't believe for a second that early James has a deeply held belief that couldn't be changed by popular consensus changing overnight. Where the winds of the where how how fickle the mainstream ideas of politics and other stuff, like, I mean, you can just look at the woke stuff. I mean, Trump got in and it's already losing like its prestige. Like, people, not I'm not saying that it's like over at all, but it's funny how people who you would think are you know pretty heavy in one direction, like it looks like things are going to start changing. They kind of adapt, and it's just a self-preservation technique,
And
honestly.
it's funny too. You're talking about the recent election, and you could, I guess, argue there's sort of a national mandate to be pro government now.
Hmm.
And
Right.
like I know a guy that took part in the like the Palestine protests
Hmm.
going on, and he's got people like just dogging him on on social media for being a libtard,
Hmm.
like just normie people that have no reason really to open their mouth, and these are people that not the band, like these are like nerdy people, like you know what I mean,
Hmm.
like like people that you wouldn't think are like just out like coming out and basically like saying like like the left is stupid,
Hmm.
and it's just kind of funny to see how much that the popular consensus just drives people.
Right.
Like people don't really operate on a value system of what do I ascertain is the correct, mode. And I'm not going to get into, because I don't believe everybody, you know, not to get all theological here, but I don't believe anybody thinks good. If you do think good, it's because of the Holy Spirit. But
Hmm.
I believe that, most people kind of operate on okay, like what do I need to do to get into the crowd and get access, not even to the crowd. It's not about fitting in to fit in with everybody. It's about fitting in so you can have a normal, comfortable life. And I believe
Hmm.
that is what most people are trying to do, because if you don't fit in a small area, it's going to decrease your chances of, reproducing,
Hmm.
having a family, finding employment, surviving. So everything is kind of naturally, putting someone to be somebody that, sticks with the clan. And that's not
Hmm.
exactly all bad, but for some civilizations that's, ends
Hmm.
up being bad.
Right.
You know what I
No,
mean?
that's excellent. Yeah, excellent put there. Yeah, there. I mean, yeah, I don't really have much more to say about it other than just these people are just they're losers. And I will say another thing with like hick libby people, it's usually gay people too. Which that kind of goes without saying.
Well, yeah, that's another thing too, is that, and I'll get on a whole. I think I've said this when I interviewed Jack Milton, um, but I think I told him that the gay stuff it's funny because
The gay stuff. It's funny.
well it,
It
it
is
all
funny.
it all started as like it all started as like this, oh, like people were coming out of the closet, like, oh, like they're gay, and then it's like, oh, they're a little more than just gay, they're kind of a freak. They're
Oh
like
yeah.
they're kinda open about what they like done to them, and then now it's like there's no people being gay, it's like they're trans. And it's like an
Right.
evolving process. It's not they don't just like it's not like, "Oh, I, like, wake up, put my, work clothes on, and go to the office." It's like, it really
Hmm.
does eat them
Right.
up, and it does
They're more
change them.
out and proud
Mhm.
about it.
Yes. And, and I could say the same about this guy that I know that was in all the left stuff. He's not gay, at least as far as I know, but it's weird, like, seeing how that, like, being, like, a leftist, like, just physically changes your body. It, like, fattens your face and just really, really weird stuff, and makes the guy looks tired now more than ever,
Hmm.
and,
Hmm.
but where was it go well, yeah, I was going with that about it's like a demonic possession that slowly, a virus that eats the person alive. Um,
Oh yeah.
but what was I saying about about how relate to that to hick libs? Most of the hick libs I've interacted with are just simply people that, are straight men. Most of them are kind of a more, like, nerdy disposition,
Right.
and it
Right.
just sort of like they just sort of like, they just don't fit in, and it kinda makes them pushes them out, and they become like a woke kinda person.
And they're usually guys that get along really well with their lit teacher, their English lit teacher.
Um, not well,
At least in my experience, because most of the time English lit teachers, even if they're not trying to be, they think that they're like when they prescribe, you know, To Kill a Mockingbird or like what's another Uncle Tom's Cabin. They think that they're pushing against some sort of narrative that's prevalent in all of society when they're literally like they're part of the institutions that you know basically terrorize children their entire lives. So like and the people who and what's I mean I don't know maybe I'm just kind of outing myself where I went to school, but like particularly guys who got along with their English lit teacher and like were totally in love with everything that they did were usually like if they weren't queer they were like effeminate hick libby, I hashtag I freaking love reading guys, and none of the books that they read have any substance. It's all just like, at best it's like anti-racism. and at worst, it's like weird smut stuff.
Yeah, and in the public education system I was in, we were never really forced to read any like we never read To Kill a Mockingbird, never read Uncle Tom's Cabin. We read a
Lucky.
lot. We read a lot of like what I'm going to call like anti woke World War II type literature.
Hmm.
But we
Like
also
what?
like the Number of the Stars was like a big one.
Oh, okay.
But they were almost like we almost were like in this sort of like anti. It was just everything we did was like anti propaganda education. Everything was sort of anti communist, anti dictatorship kind of. Which you could argue is I don't know if it was. You could argue that it was supposed to be lefty coded. It just so happened that it wasn't because it was taught by like normal people.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
telling
yeah.
you basically like how like don't buy what a commercial is telling you because they will basically want your money is what it instead of it being like some kind of like lefty activist sort of lesson, it became more like like yeah, like don't trust NordVPN, they might actually leak your data, something like that is what it became more like than not. And
Mhm.
yeah, but I guess like and you said that you really didn't have much more to say, but I'm really glad that you and Jack and other people, John, have really started putting out content. It represents our group as a whole, but it represents our state and our people in a very good way. And I've heard other people within this sphere talk really good about the Alabama gang
Mhm.
and that they're good quality people. And
If even if we're not, I mean, speaking personally, if we're not the most intelligent people, we're pretty like ride or die. I mean, like we kind of, and I know, like we basically try to fall in line too, like especially in this type of sphere. Like I don't, I would like to think we don't really try to showboat, and we kind of want to just be in a group or be in a scene where we can maybe contribute something, and not necessarily out for clout. Like that's another thing about Southerners is like I don't, I there we're if anything, it's probably a negative in the modern world, but like we're overly sincere about everything.
I guess that's kind of true. And I've noticed too that when people say like, "Oh, we're informal," or we're not down to business," and it's like when we think being down to business is like just like, "Hey, like, are you listening?" Kind of the sort of what I'm saying. Whereas other people I've interacted with from up north seem like being down to business is like, okay, like you're not like looking at me seriously. Like you're not. It's not just like oh, am I? Are you listening to what I'm saying? It's like your tone is not serious enough. Um,
Yeah.
it's something I've noticed, and that yeah, it does seem like people from the south are kind of like they take hearing something serious as you wouldn't do it in a tensed up mode. You would do it in a laid back way, is to receive something.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm just being kind of like hypothetical here. I'm not trying to think of really any particular instances, but like yeah, I guess like a good way to put it is like with my interactions with people from up north, a lot of the political stuff we talked about today, they it's very like we can't do this, we can't say this, we can't think like this. And then people from the south, it's kind of more like a
We're uncouth.
yeah, it's like he said that word. We can't think like that.
Hmm.
And it's not so much of a yeah, and but my biggest fear with people in our state, in our region, is that the more the national consensus advances, just because we got quote unquote our guy in the White House doesn't mean anything's going to exactly change on the front lines. And I'm afraid that the majority of our people would actually abandon our values and what we stand for, just to basically prosper. That's what
Right.
worries me the most, and that's why even though Trump got elected, what I saw in 2020 doesn't make me, it makes me feel like I'm on the back foot in a way that,
Mm-hmm.
like, why am I the only person I know in my area that basically did not get vaxxed?
Mm-hmm.
You know
Right.
I'm the only person in my friend group who wasn't even, who's not vaxxed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just really odd because I know people that were, diehard, CSA reenactors, very brag about how they're politically incorrect, but they took that vaccine and they'll tell you that vaccine is great for you and you
Mm-hmm.
need to take it, and that and if you're kind of like a seed oil, uh, sort of like trying to be healthy person, like you're just kind of like a nut,
Right.
that you're sort of off the chain and that you're kind of a weirdo. And that's another thing too that I've noticed is that, even though in the wake of all this sort of health stuff that's come out, I mean, I could think of like 10 years ago, if you were somebody that like didn't feed your kid McDonald's and you didn't watch television, you were seen as like a freak.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, and
Crunch.
it's like, and
The
it's like,
crunchy. Sorry.
yo, you go ahead. You go ahead. You probably
Yeah.
have,
No. The crunchy parent thing was like a weird lefty thing for like years. If like people often associate it like in media with like religious fundamentalists, but like that's like freaking I don't know, like Mennonites or something. But like if there was any of that out in the real world, like people who love raw milk, I mean that's just like a lefty thing. That was like a hippie thing. And I've got to call you out for some crap right here. I'm looking up Number of the Stars. This is not a based and red pilled book if I'm reading the Wikipedia page.
no, no, it's not. It's not. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean that it was.
Okay.
I was meaning to, and I'm trying.
You said anti woke, so
Um, yeah, I said it was. Okay, yeah, I know what you're saying. Hold on a second. Let me. I'm out real quick. No, yeah, I got my thing mixed up. It was anti. It was pro. It was basically pro World War II woke, I guess is what you would say.
okay,
I'm trying.
yes,
I'm
like
trying to. I'm trying to be not direct. If you know what I'm saying.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's about some people of a certain tribe escaping a group.
It's anti woke right is what it is.
Yeah, yeah, it's anti
It's a,
woke, right? It's kosher. Let's just say it's a kosher narrative about World War II.
yes, and
Very kosher. Yes. Well, I'm sorry you had to be subject. I read the Diary of Anne Frank, and I thought that was a little bit of a weird book. When I read it
well, I
in
forgot.
school.
I forgot. We did have to read that. We did have to read that book, and but we never read the whole part of it. We read like weird like random chapters, and it never. When we read it, we never really read anything about anything like serious or of value in it. We really only read like parts about basically like the getting inside the mind of a teenage girl trapped in a closet. Basically, is what
Yeah.
not gay trapped in the closet. I meant like trapped in a Amsterdam like I think it was an attic they say that they lived in. I'm not too sure what it was.
Look, Anne Frank was the original femcel. Okay,
Yeah, yes, yes. Hold on a
hundred
second real quick.
percent.
Let me mute my mic again.
He's wheezing.
Anyway, what was I going? Where was I going with all
Yeah.
that?
Well, where are you going with that, Otto? Before I
I I really,
interrupted you.
I really don't remember. But what I was gonna say is that like yeah, we read that for like a little bit. Never really engaged with it in any serious way. And I think though, I just remember in high school, everything we read was like Fahrenheit 451 and like
Yeah.
Orwellian themed.
Which Fahrenheit 451 is an excellent book, by the way. I mean,
Yeah, it was good.
it's.
We
I
re-
mean, because it's the dystopia that's like the grotesque well basically Brave New World and Fahrenheit 451 like came to pass really.
yes, and
1984 will never come to pass. I mean, that book is just like all sorts of it's just like it's dystopia pornography there,
yeah,
whereas whereas Aldous Huxley's book and then Ray Bradbury are really trying to interface with like some of these, sort of conflicting ideas. Like how can people like sort of give up their autonomy? Like to people in the early 20th century, that would be sort of ridiculous, to like give
Yes.
up your autonomy. But like, no, people line up for it every day, and they're going to keep doing it until the country falls apart. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm sorry, another tangent there, but yeah, no, Fahrenheit 451 is still a great book.
Yeah. I would like to maybe go back and read it because there was some stuff in there with like the cars and things that
Hmm.
didn't make sense to me.
Well, another thing it predicted was like streaming, like streamers.
I forgot there was something like that in
There's
there.
an interactive room. It's like a television show that his wife can interact with, the main character Montag, and she just gets lost in it. It doesn't really go into detail. At least if it does, I can't remember. But it sounds like an iShow Speed or like Kai Cenat or the Ralpha Mail, live stream.
Yes. But what was I gonna say? Well, I know you said you didn't have much more to say on the article and what you
Mhm.
wrote, and I'm like need to get up here and get something done like here in the next few seconds. So I'm
All
probably
right.
gonna have to end this. But where can people find you?
So follow me on X at YANCEY. That's Yancey underscore Muzak, MUZAK. Find me there, and that's the same handle for my YouTube. And I'm started the Substack so I could write a little bit more about music and just especially in this sphere. Like there's the excellent Tookies Mag guys who review books produced by like some of these guys in the Twitter sphere and the dissident sphere. They're not necessarily conservative or right wing all the time, but just it's an interesting place where some interesting stuff's being made, but there's no sort of vector of which to like be exposed to some of it. So Tookie's Mag is great for the books, and they kind of inspired me to just start a Substack. Just like, well, I'm having a hard time trying to. There's not a lot of music, I guess, for one, but at least it's a spot where if new music comes along, I'll find it, and I'm a musician myself, so not I don't really write so much as I just sort of have. It's an informal blog, the Substack. This may be the first and last article I do of this type of this type of pointed political nature, just because I don't really have that much to offer. I mean, there are tons of people who have you know, um, can articulate a much more vivid political, viewpoint than me and the theory behind it. So anyway, but I'm also a musician. So I put out stuff on YouTube right now. I'm sort of leaving the. I'm on an independent label that I'm actually sort of leaving right now due to some creative disagreements. So I'll be teaming up with another guy to be doing maybe more physical releases as well as being on streaming. So, but basically, you can find my link tree for everything on X at Yancey underscore Muzak to put it all in a nice little bow, and you can find links to my Substack. So, and if anybody has any music that they want me to take a look at or just promote, I don't have that many subscribers right now, but hopefully, with the success of the OGC article, more subscribers will come now. But yeah, just DM me if you have any music that you'd like me to take a look at or promote, and check out my own music.
Yes, and we need more of our people making music. But anyway, as always, you find me, at Otto Wolf Helmson, and same as on like autohawker.substack.com. It's a capital O and a capital W. Well, all right, Yancey, thank you for coming on. And if you wish to continue this, talk and this discussion, you can find me on, Discord, and I'll be on there tonight. Other than that, thank you for coming on, and thank y'all for listening in. Y'all have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Otto.
Yes, sir, and likewise.